We are on the road today. We're not too far from home. We're in Inman, South Carolina, and we are talking to a gospel music legend, Kenny Gates. And Kenny, we want to welcome you to Gospel Music Today.
Well, thank you, Ken. We have something in common. We have almost the same, we've got the same initials.
That's right.
But I would like to thank you and your wonderful wife for dropping in today and sharing some of my memories.
Right. We'll take some pictures around this room a little later on too. This is like a mini museum of gospel music. It's wonderful that you've saved the stuff. So much stuff gets lost in the shuffle. We want to go back a little ways. Well, maybe it's a long way to your beginnings in gospel music. What was the Blue Ridge Quartet your first quartet? Did you sing before that?
No, it was the only professional quartet I ever sang in, or played for, rather. But my beginning started back at a little church where we lived next door to the church. And one Sunday night, we had a quartet visit our church, and we were there, and the leader of the group, his name was Paul Collins, and I didn't know it at the time, but he was a music teacher. He was a representative of the James D. Vaughn Music Company in Lawrenceburg, Tennessee, and he taught private piano lessons, voice lessons, and held singing schools. So that's where I actually started. My mother talked to him that night about me taking piano lessons because she had been trying to teach me some notes and my lines and spaces and things, and she thought it was time to turn me over to a teacher. So that's where I got started, by taking lessons there. And later on I went to his singing schools, and this was even before my voice changed. In the singing schools, I sang with the ladies. I was the alto singer.
All right.
And I guess my first experience with a quartet was one weekend. His quartet was booked up in around Boone, North Carolina, up in the mountains. And his tenor singer got sick and couldn't go, so he came to my house. We didn't have a phone. Came by and asked if I could go with them on that trip over the weekend and sing tenor in their group.
How old were you then?
I was about 10 years old.
Whoa. All right.
But I could sing the alto part, and that's the same thing as the tenor singers would sing.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that was my first experience in a quartet.
Wow. When was your first full-time, what year was that with the Blue Ridge Quartet?
Well, in 1949, the Blue Ridge Quartet had relocated to Spartanburg, South Carolina, and David Reese had been playing piano for him for some time before that. And he had got married, and he was going to get out of the quartet business, and he got a job as a radio announcer in a radio station in Newton, North Carolina. And the tenor singer of the group was from the same part of the country I was, up in Lincoln, North Carolina, Lincoln County. And he remembered me from the part-time quartet I was with up there. And he recommended me, and I came down here, and they took me on a 2-week trial. And I've been here ever since, still trying out, I guess.
It was a long 2-week trial, wasn't it?
Yeah, turned into 28 years.
In the early days, the Blue Ridge Quartet was involved in radio.
Right.
What did you guys do on the radio?
Well, we had 2 radio programs a day done live. The first radio program of the day was along with the early morning guy. Every radio station had an early morning man, and so he wanted something to make his show a little different. So we'd be there at 6 o'clock in the morning, and he came in at 5. And at 6 o'clock, we were in the studio, and he would play some records and maybe do a weather report, and then send it into the studio, and we'd do a couple of songs. Then back to him, and then he would do some more news and weather and farm reports, and maybe play a record or two. Then back into the studio again for a couple more Blue Ridge records, songs. And we did that for an hour every morning. Then in the afternoon, then we had our own personal 15-minute program, 4:45 in the afternoon. And we were on that radio program for years. And from that, we advertised for concert programs, and we worked, I guess we worked every little church and school in the whole county and several counties around.
I can imagine. What was the radio studio like? I imagine you guys, one microphone.
Well, for a long time it was only one microphone. Later on they started using two, one for the piano, one for the singers.
You really had to sing.
Oh yeah. And it was, they had a boom mic, and two would stand on one side of the mic and two would stand on the other side.
Blue Ridge Quartet also involved in the very early days of television.
Right.
Tell me about that.
Well, in the late 50s, the WSPA, the radio station here in Spartanburg that we were on, they had applied for a television license. And then the late 50s, they went on air, and we were in their original schedule. And we were very lucky in a way. They scheduled us for 7 o'clock on Tuesday nights. And we followed the CBS News at 6:30, and then we were on at 7. And it was a neat thing for us, because there was only 3 TV stations in this area. We were on one of them, and the people watching, if they watched the CBS News, if they didn't particularly want to see us, then they had to get up out of their chairs and walk to the TV and turn the knob to change the channel. So we got a lot of listeners that didn't even want to watch us.
That's right. Was that live in those days too?
All live, yes, sir.
Wow. And how, every night?
It was Tuesday nights.
Okay.
Just once a week.
Yeah. Live television.
Live television. And if you made mistakes, you just had to grin and bear it. You know,
That's right.
There wasn't any backing up, doing it over.
And you remember when they first brought in the tape machines?
And I can't remember the year it was, but that really was a good thing, because then we could go in and tape our show, and then we could book dates closer to our TV show, because we could tape it during the daytime and be gone and do a concert that night. You know.
We talked to a lot of people at the National Quartet Convention and events like that, but we talked to people from all around the country, and frequently I will ask them what got them interested in gospel music and quartet music. And there's a certain age group where the answer will always be, it was the gospel singing caravan. You guys were involved with that too?
Yes, we were. And if I had to pick a time in my career that seemed to be the best thing we ever did was when that happened. And I don't know whether you need all the details to do that or not, but there was 3 people from Jacksonville, Florida area, Jacksonville Beach, in fact. And they were all businessmen. One was a movie theater manager. One was a DJ on a local radio station, played gospel music. The other one was a retired man who was a old retired circus promoter. And every morning after they got together at this restaurant and had coffee every morning. It was a regular thing. And later on, after they've been doing that for a long time, one of them one day said, we ought to find us something we can do that'd be fun. And well, what can we do? And they hashed it around a little bit, and somebody said, well, why don't we just promote a gospel singing? Well, that sounded like a good idea. He said the old circus promoter said, well, I'll tell you what, if we're going to do that, let's call it something new and different. Let's don't call it all night singing. Let's call it a double header. Let's don't call it nothing. Let's get a name that's something different. Then they decide, well, who are we going to get? I said, well, and there he too came back into it. Said, well, I'll tell you what. So we need 4 groups, and we don't need any 2 alike. It needs to be 4 completely different groups. Then that's when the radio DJ sort of come into play there, and he, because he had been playing records by all of us, and so he knew who all the groups were. So he said, well, what about a family group? Yeah, that's family group, that's good. And he said, well, the Lefevre Trio, or Lefevres from Atlanta, Georgia, it's a mixed group, it's all family. Yeah, okay. Well, we need a quartet maybe. And so several names are tossed around, and an all-male quartet, well, our name surfaced at the top. Then they're looking for another group. What other kind of groups are? Well, there's a girls trio in Birmingham, the Johnson sisters. Well, that's all different, all girls, young girls, and all and sisters. And then they needed the 4th group, and well, there's a group up in Charlotte, North Carolina, the Rangers trio, and all guys and young guys, and really got a good group. So there they had it. So in the end, they decided it was going to be called the Gospel Singing Caravan, and that was the group.
And where was that produced?
They started looking for a place to put on the first program, and they picked out Elberton, Georgia. And the reason Elberton, Georgia was picked, I don't know whether you know it or not, but there's a lot of granite quarries in and around Elberton. And it was called the granite quarry of the world, or capital of the world. And they had just donated enough granite to build bleachers for their local high school, and they called it the Granite Bowl. So for the grand opening for the Granite Bowl, they had the Gospel Singing Caravan come to the Granite Bowl in Elberton to do a show.
The groups that sang on the Caravan toured as the Gospel Singing Caravan.
Right, but that was later on. And then we had a tremendous crowd that time, and then they wanted to do another show. So they booked a next show in Anderson, South Carolina, and then after that, the Rangers needed more work than we were doing. We were only doing one day a week with the Caravan, so they pulled out. And then in the meantime, the promoters that got the Caravan together decided they just well, we've been there, done that, so we're through with it. So us and Lefevre's got together and discussed that thing. So we don't need to let this go. It's too good to let it go. So we called them and offered to buy it from them. I said, no, you don't need to buy it. We'll give it to you. You can have it. Do whatever you want to do with it. So we started making TV shows, and it started spreading out, and we finally had about 50-some stations in our syndication, and it was a wonderful ride. Really was. And we always worked together as a group, and even if we worked concerts with other groups on the show, we always went on as a package.
Yeah.
We didn't change our routine. We didn't let them split us up. We went on as a group, as a unit.
Yeah.
And it was really good for all of us.
Well, it's still well remembered. We hear that all the time. The Blue Ridge Quartet, as a quartet, sang in a wide variety of venues and locations. Not just, you didn't just stay to the churches like a lot of the groups today. You were in a lot of different places.
Well, after the Caravan disbanded, our bass singer that was Burl Screevil, he was with the group when I came with the group, but he later, while I was still with the group, he left and joined the Sunshine Boys for a while. Well, he had just returned from them to our group, and we were needing some dates up in West Virginia and Pennsylvania, up north, and Burl had been with the Sunshine Boys up there, so he called a radio station in Wheeling, West Virginia, and we had a Saturday night that we hadn't booked and didn't have anywhere to go, so he called the radio station and said, "Hey, Blue Ridge can work the jamboree tonight." Fine, come on up. Well, it didn't pay very much of a talent fee, but we passed out records, sold records like passing out handbills.
Yeah.
we didn't make much money as a talent fee, but we sold a busload of records. And so we wound up being signed up as Jamboree talent. And from that, since that was a country music station, although we didn't do anything but gospel at the time, people, I think promoters and that sort of thing, they thought of us as being country.
Yeah.
And so we got to work things that most of the groups never had an opportunity to work. We got into doing fairs and carnivals and amusement parks, along with the regular gospel. But we always sang gospel.
Yeah.
Later on, we did maybe do some borderline songs, like after we had done some shows. In fact, we had worked the Southern States Fair with Furlan Husky in Atlanta. And he had a brand new song that when we worked that fair with him called Wings of a Dove.
Oh, yeah.
And he taught it to us. The next week we recorded it, and it was one of our biggest records.
Yeah. The Blue Ridge Quartet went on the road for the first time in what year?
1946 originally.
Okay. And finally retired.
It was in the early 90s. I'm not sure exactly. It was they went for about 5 years after I had left the group.
Right. That's a long, long run for a quartet.
There was some music companies in Texas, the Stamps Baxter Company, the Frank Stamps Music Company, and maybe some others. And in the early days, they had professional groups that they hired and had on salary out on the road doing concerts and selling songbooks. That was their main source of income, was selling songbooks.
Yeah.
Well, there had been a quartet that represented the Stamps Baxter group in Raleigh, North Carolina, called the Lone Star Quartet. And the Stamps group, Frank Stamps group, formed a new quartet called the Blue Ridge Quartet to go to Raleigh to compete with the Stamps Baxter group and the Lone Star Quartet. And later on, they were both on the radio and on big stations in Raleigh. And later on, some of the quartet members that was in the Lone Star Quartet went with the Blue Ridge, and just like some of the pictures up there we'll look at a little bit later.
Yeah.
And but anyway, they back in those days, I don't know whether you'd know about it from the part of the country you're from, but the polio season in this part of the country was a bad thing every year. And during the summertime when school was out and nothing going on in the schools, they were warning people on the radio and the newspapers, don't take your children out to any kind of public appearances or keep them at home, you know, because of polio. And so they had to move out of Raleigh, and they had to move out of Burlington, North Carolina for the same reason. And one of the singers, the tenor singer in the group at that time, his name was Leonard Mathis. They call him Red because he's redheaded. And Red was from this part of the country, and he knew some people down here that had the churches where he used to be located. And he made a couple of phone calls and got them some dates down here. They come down here and had some good crowds, and that's when they got connected with the radio station here and decided to move here.
Yeah. Well, it's an amazing story, and I know there are many. We could sit here for a long time and hear the stories. We only have a 30-minute show. I wish we could go on and on. But Kenny Gates, it's just been wonderful to have you on Gospel Music today.
Thank you, Ken, for thinking of me and wanting to hear my story. I'm, like I say, I'm in my room of memories here, and I love to rehash my old memories. They sure are precious to me, and always will be.
Yeah.